This is the Clean Hits Hockey Podcast. We got the whole Clean Hits crew here, and today we are thrilled to welcome back one of the most trusted voices in the hockey prospect analyst community. You've seen him on Sportsnet covering everything from the NHL Draft to junior hockey. He's a longtime friend of the show and always one of our favorite guests. Sam Cosentino is back on Clean Hits. Sam, how are you doing?
Yeah, great to be on, guys. It's nice to see the Utah hockey scene really starting to take shape here. We got the logo going now. We got the new name, so things are starting to rock and roll.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think when you were on last August or so, there was still the club, the hockey club, the clubbers. And I think we were just kind of chatting about the 2024 draft. The team had just selected Tej, and you were kind of already giving us a preview of the 2025 draft, which we'll have a lot to talk about today.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's going to be it's absolutely fascinating. And, obviously Utah fans would be really happy bumping up the 10 spots as they did. So it's kind of like found money. But essentially, like moving from 14 to 4 is a world of difference in this draft class. I have a bit of a drop off at around 12. So those 10 spots were that was a big win for the hockey club Mammoth.
Yeah, nice little change of pace for sure, because they definitely didn't win any lotteries in Arizona. Just starting with the market, I know you had an opportunity to get down to a game there in Salt Lake, Sam. Just curious what you thought of the arena, of the market, the fans, and just how you think it's going to go going forward.
Well, it's pretty cool, when you have the mountains as the backdrop, and it's easy to get around the city in terms of traffic, like coming in from the airport and stuff. And then for our job in particular, a number of hotel options that are literally a block or two away, and in our case across the street from the rink. So the logistics piece is pretty neat. Just in terms of the fan energy and the way they filled the building, and being loud, that was great to see. Of course, I'm a big fan of the color scheme, big fan of the ownership group and the management group, right on down to the coaching staff that I know quite well from my days in junior hockey. So I just think all told, with what Ashley and Ryan Smith want to do to get the barn more hockey friendly, super impressed. A little bit of a challenge from where our broadcast position was, because it's just a temporary spot. But once everything's up and running the way that they want it, and it becomes more hockey friendly, it's going to be a great place.
Yeah,
it's loud.
It's very loud.
Yeah,
and I mean, yeah, that entire community is just having so much fun with it. It's lots of inside jokes, lots of little inside tidbits that if you know, you know, and the whole community is building something really special. But last time you were on, again, this was way back when, in August of 2024, we were hyping up Tej Ginla, Utah's first ever first round draft pick, and the big season ahead, and then boom, hip surgery. Missed the rest of the season for that junior year. Have you heard anything about where he's at physically? I know this is a big off season for him, and obviously this upcoming season is going to be huge for him as well.
So you get to the draft and you're working so hard to get all your information and get all your stuff done. Then the draft comes and there's like a nice sigh of relief, right? And then the season gets going again, and you're trying to track these guys and see what's going on. But immediately, like especially in August, your attention flips to the next year's draft class, because you get the Holinka, and that's the start of the year. So in terms of Tej and where he is at in his rehabilitation, not sure where that stands right now. But I mean, all signs pointing to a recovery that's going to allow him to play for a Memorial Cup team, and that should be really fun to watch and track throughout the rest of this year.
And talk about a great venue for a Memorial Cup. There's a lot worse places to be in this world than Kelowna in May or June, right? I mean, what a great market to get that Mem Cup, and really excited to see Tej. I think we're going to have to do a Utah Mammoth fan club road trip up there to beautiful Kelowna. I'm sure you're looking forward to it too.
Oh, it's a great spot. Again, logistically, like there is a little bit of what's happening in Utah when you look in Kelowna, right? You got some water there, you got the lakes, you got the mountains as a backdrop as well. You're only an hour away from Big White, but you can see some snow caps in the distance, and a place where you could, if you find the right time, you can ski and play golf at the same time or in the same day. But when it comes to the Kelowna Rockets, long storied franchise, the 2019 Cup got canceled. The 2020 Cup rather got canceled due to COVID, and so as a result of that, Bruce Hamilton and his group, Kelowna Rockets, they win the bid successfully. They got a lot of work to do as a team. Tej is a great starting point, of course, but it's an unbelievable spot. And I guess my one kind of regret, and it wasn't through any fault of mine, is that I didn't get a chance to do a Memorial Cup there. I came on the scene. The last one was hosted there in 2004. I came onto the scene for the 2005-06 season, and I missed out on that. It would have been cool to do one there for sure.
Awesome. Well, Sam, we know the Combine has just wrapped up and you were there in person. So what stood out this year, and any players that specifically kind of popped out or started really creating a buzz, whether that's due to their kind of physicality and how they tested, or maybe some of their interviews? And then, like, from what your experience is, what do you think is the most important aspect of that Combine process, whether that is the interviews or the testing or medical evaluations?
Yeah, well, I think, for two guys in particular, the medical pieces was big there. So talking about Roger McQueen out of the Brandon Wheat Kings, obviously people want to know what's happening with the back issue that he has been battling with all year. And then the other guy is Carter Bear, who plays with the Everett Silvertips, and a guy who's very highly thought of, and a guy who that people are looking at in that probably 8 to 15 range, and his Achilles issue. So I know he's back skating. Roger McQueen thinks that all of his injury issues are in the past. And so for those two guys, the medical piece was most important. Now, Bear didn't test. McQueen did in terms of the physical testing part, but those guys were obviously involved in the interview process. When it comes to the fitness testing results, I've been trying to get in touch with a couple of teams about that, and for those who participated, how they did, and not a ton of feedback on that, because scouts typically tend not to be too engaged in the exercise and sports science piece, although it's another piece of the puzzle for general managers and head scouts to kind of pour through. I think the interview process, though, is where things can have a dramatic impact. I mean, Brady Martin walked into the room and he knocked it out of the park with a number of teams. I think a guy like Lyndon Lakovic, who's really kind of candid and outgoing and fun, I think he helped himself. Caleb Denoye, straight shooter, gives you the goods. I think he's another guy that really helped himself in the interview process. Milton Gastrin out of Sweden, he's a guy that I think helped himself a lot. So I do think that there are situations where you want to corroborate the character that you see on the ice as a scout with what you hope is the character off ice. And those few players, I do believe, were able to do that in the interview process.
That's great to hear. I'm curious, just with the draft being decentralized, did you see a lot of commingling of other general managers at this event, or was it pretty much prospect focus?
So for me, I got in there Wednesday night, kind of late, due to some family commitments. It's about an hour drive from my house here, so it's pretty easy to get into Buffalo. So Thursday, spent all day in interviews, Friday all day in interviews, went out Thursday and Friday night for dinner, and saw a number of people. But I think by that time, a lot of the GMs had done kind of their business earlier in the week. And I know on Saturday, for the fitness testing, I saw Mike Grier of San Jose there. I saw Billy Armstrong there, of course, of Utah. But other than that, I didn't see a ton of general managers that stuck around for the physical piece on Saturday. But having said that, there's no question that earlier in the week, from everything that I've heard, there was a lot of commingling, if you will.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be a really fun week, a couple weeks in advance. But last year, Utah went viral for asking a pretty unique question to the prospects. They actually asked them what their Uber rating was, and I didn't even know that was a thing you could look up. Did you hear anything about any weird questions asked by any team this year, or any strange tactics taken by any team?
Montreal, the New York Rangers asked guys to participate in a numbers game. I don't know exactly how it worked, but many of the players found that challenging. The Montreal Canadiens are always asking, like, what animal would you be? That's something that, on the ice and off the ice. And it's interesting to to hear the answers. I think there was a question out there about either saving some of your teammates or eliminating the competition. I think there was something to do with that. So you're always going to find those little tweaks and things, and more or less just to see how people respond. Like, are you happy? Are you sad? Are you pissed that you were asked the question? Do you have a really good answer? How quickly can you respond? Does the response tell me about the character of a person based on it, that question having some sort of psychology to it? So those things are always going to exist. Some teams employ that strategy more than others, but definitely a few questions that came out there that rattled the guys.
I can only imagine the responses to, are you going to kill your teammate or are you going to survive? I would love to hear it.
There's that old crazy one about the, would you rather pull a $50 bill off the toilet seat or pull a $100 bill out of the toilet bowl? That one was always like,
yes,
one of those
take both.
Who came up with that one?
Take both. Yeah.
I think it had something to do with if you were a commander of a submarine and you could save 10 of your or 20 of your own guys or sink the opposition submarine, what would you do? And I think that kind of elicits some interesting answers for sure. And surely that gets evaluated by somebody. And then this guy's a good character or a bad character based on his answer,
Right.
Yeah. And always fun to throw them off the prep answers that they plan out with their agents. Sam, I know when we spoke a year ago, you had James Higgins as your number one and Schaefer as your number two. Just curious on your thoughts on those two players this year and what made Higgins slide down and Schaefer climb to number one on your list.
So I'm going to start with Higgins. I'm not so sure that he did anything to really get him out of the way, but I do think a lot of players elevated their game. And so then you go back to Higgins and you're like, okay, I'm going to compare him to what Macklin Celebrini did as a young freshman who goes into college hockey. Celebrini almost 2 points per game. He wins the Hobie. And then you look at Higgins, and he's a point per game, which is absolutely brilliant as a freshman. Doesn't get the Hobie. His team ends up losing out. And I just think when it comes to James Higgins, to do the full kind of skill work on him, you have to look at what he's done internationally, right? He's been brilliant at the under 17 set a record, under 18 set a record, 9 points as an underage centerman this year at the World Juniors and the gold medal team. Those are all things that I'm looking at when it comes to Higgins and his proficiency. But I do think a guy like Matthew Schaefer, who plays defense, who can literally change games from a number of different angles, where Higgins may only be able to have that game-changing impact on the offensive side. He's still tenacious and competes and does all those things. But I think Matthew Schaefer's ability to impact the game in a game-changing way, he has more ability to do it in a number of ways than, let's say, Higgins. And so that's why I've seen the shift for most people, myself included, as Higgins bumping down to 2 or lower and Schaefer moving up.
And another player seems to be getting a lot of the buzz, a lot of the headlines right now is Brady Martin. And we talk a lot about players who play Bill Armstrong hockey, and he might be top of the list, described as farm strong. We've heard that buzzword going around the last couple of days. Curious as well, your thoughts on this player, and is he a realistic option for Utah to take at number 4?
Well, I actually do think he enters the conversation there for sure. But he was super refreshing in that he walks into your room and he's unapologetically himself. Like, I'm a farmer. I grew up a farmer. Farming's still important for me. If my family can't go to the draft, then I'm not going to the draft, and we'll find a way to do it at the farm. And I think that's a really cool thing. Like a lot of times, if you listen to National Hockey League players, even the best of the best, the thing that sets them off course is confidence and losing your confidence. Goal scorer loses his confidence. This guy's not playing with confidence. The goalie is not confident, that sort of thing. And I think with a guy like Brady, that's probably not something you have to worry about because he's not influenced by anything that's going on around him. He just knows who he is, what he has to do, how he has to do it, and he does it. And so I think Brady really acquitted himself quite well in terms of just a pure interview process. Having said that, hockey-wise, unbelievable at the under 18s, helps lead a team to a gold medal. I think there's some leadership qualities in him. I can't say enough about Brady Martin, though. I think he's a wonderful player, and it wouldn't shock me about him going to number 4.
Awesome.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, and he did do that on the strength of, as you said, that really great tournament in Texas that he had, where he kind of flipped that whole thing on its ear. He had like 30 hits or something insane like that in a short period. How much can a strong tournament like that, where all eyes are on you, really improve a player's stock in the eyes of NHL teams? I mean, it's a short tournament, but everybody's looking, and it seems to have really helped Martin. Do you think that that can drastically change a player's position come draft day? And do you think that's really fair that it does?
I don't know about drastically. And is it fair that it does? I think you have to have the full kind of workup in order to make those decisions, because ultimately they're multi-million-dollar decisions that you're making. So when I look at Brady Martin, okay, so he left you with a lasting impression. The thing about the under 18s, though, it's usually juxtaposed against the Stanley Cup. And so if you're out watching games during the day, you're a GM, you're a head coach, you're a scout, you're coming back to the room and you're watching how hard and heavy it is. You're like, whoa. So that impression also sticks in your mind. But I do believe that the recency bias does play a part in all of this. Maybe not as big a part as we would like. Thinking about Philip Ekberg, I think he led the tournament. I watched him a number of times in Ottawa. Like, I don't think he's a first round guy. I don't even think he's a second round guy for that matter. But he left a really good lasting impression. Sasha Boumedian, who is a guy who didn't produce a ton of points at the college level, but he went for Sweden and set the defenseman point record. So he was able to be let go a little bit. So it probably helped a guy like him. I don't believe it can have a drastic impact, but I do believe it can have an impact.
And Sam, one more question from me. Caleb Deone seems to be getting some maybe lesser value placed on him, because you look at the Q and a lot of people don't think it's as strong as the OHL or the WHL. Do you put any stock into the Q being maybe a lesser league than the other two? And should that impact a player like Caleb?
Well, I think just from a pure population standpoint, there's not as much to draw from. I think when you add in the Quebec angle, it's also more difficult for the Quebec Maritimes League to draw players in from the United States. So as a result of those two things, the league is typically of a slightly lower quality. And that's not anything to do with the players that are in the league. It's just the circumstances surrounding what happens in the league. Fewer teams, of course, than the other two leagues, and a situation where, hey, you get quite a big dichotomy between the teams located in Quebec and the teams located in the Maritimes. Having said all that, though, I think if you scouted Caleb Deone in a vacuum, you'd still see that he's pretty talented, whether he's playing, at the Hlinka, or whether he's playing in the playoffs for Moncton, or whether he's playing in the CHL USA Top Prospects Challenge. He's remarkably consistent in his effort in all three zones. And I think that's going to play no matter who the competition is, when it is you're playing against said competition. And so for Deone, I think the world of him. I don't think there's any chance he gets past Utah at 4, to be perfectly honest with you.
Wow. He seems to check every box as well.
He's got big hands and big feet, and that tells me that there's a lot of growth potential available there. And that's a cool element to all of this.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And another big player who seems kind of right up Utah's alley, who's maybe not quite as consistent as Desnoyers, is Porter Martone. I watched a ton of his games this season. I've seen kind of both extremes where, one moment he looks like a future star, and then the next moment he goes a little bit quiet on you. And I think that you see a lot of that in junior hockey. And I'm curious, how much do NHL teams actually value that consistency factor in junior players? Or is it just something they assume can be fixed through development over time? Or is motor inconsistency really a big red flag for teams? I mean, no disrespect to Martone. His team loves him. He's a captain. Team Canada obviously loves him. He's clearly a great kid. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the perception around the league and how much of a factor that can play.
When you've seen a guy do it before, like you have with Porter, then I think your concern is mitigated. When you have a player like Landon Lakovic, for example, who plays in Moose Jaw, who's an extremely talented guy, he has 4 or 5 PIMs during the course of the year, and you're saying to yourself, okay, like, is there inconsistent effort and compete here? Is that a question mark? Do we need to address this with the player, so on and so forth? So I think you have 2 different cases there. I think for Porter, some of that inconsistency is just immaturity. And I do think that that's something that can come along. So I'm looking at Porter Martone. I think he's a wonderful player. I do think that consistency is something that scouts definitely take into consideration. But when you have a bit of track record of having done it before, especially as a late birthday guy who's got extra looks in the league, I think that benefits you, and I think it's benefited Porter.
Yeah, he seems like a fun player to watch. I mean, a lot of teams are comparing him to like a Kachuk light or a Corey Perry light, which kind of gets me into my next question. And I promise you, I'm not trying to radio you in 5 years. We're not really looking for career trajectories or like direct player comps. But I know as a young hockey fan, and a lot of Utah fans are actually new hockey fans, one thing that I really like to see at the draft was like a player comparison, right? So as far as playing style, let's just stick with 3 players that are right around that Utah pick that seem like legitimate chances for number 4. As far as like playing style comps for like a Desnoyers or a Higgins or a Martin, do you watch these players and say, hey, you know what, this guy reminds me a lot of X player?
You do sometimes, but I think there's a bit of a danger, like in starting your work with the comparable, because then you get married to what that player is, and all of a sudden you're comparing elements to one player that just don't exist. Right. And so as a result of doing that, and you make that comparison, you're like, oh, he's not that. And then you tend to kind of throw the player aside a little bit. Where once my research is done, and it's funny because our network is always asking for comparables because, like obviously for people like you, Kenny, who want that. And so once the work's done, then I sit back and then you open up the rosters from the NHL and you look at the scorers and then you look at the PIMS guys and then you kind of like, yeah, he reminds me of him. He's pretty good. Oh yeah, this guy really, sticks out as someone. So for those guys in particular, if I had to go off the top of my head and I'm looking at a James Higgins, I'm thinking like sort of like a Vincent Trocheck type guy. Maybe not as pesky or as annoying, but with tons of skill, played with skilled players, can help drive a line, competes. Doesn't give up much on the defensive side. Like he'd be someone I'd be thinking about in that regard. When I'm looking at Brady Martin, he's just more of like an honest, straight line guy. So he'll blow you up with the odd hit, although he's not the biggest guy. So in thinking about who that comparable might be, kind of like Sam Bennett. Like Sam Bennett is not a huge guy, but he's ridiculously strong. He's always in the fight. He's never afraid to go to the net front. Brady isn't in the same level in terms of being an antagonist, but he's a guy who's never going to be deterred. So I do see some of Sam Bennett in Brady Martin in the way they go about their game. I'd say Sam probably they both shoot the puck really well. I'd say Sam probably leans a little more on the playmaking side from when I watched him in Kingston back in the day, but I do see some of that in Brady Martin. So I guess the next guy you'd be looking at, who was the other one you had there, Kenny?
Desnoyers.
Yeah, Desnoyers. So he's like it's hard. And again, you get someone's going to look at this and say Sam Cosentino says,
yeah, I promise I didn't mean to put you in a box.
No, but he's Patrice Bergeron. So if I look at Desnoyers, he didn't play center as much as where Bergeron did. He was used more on the wing, but when he played center, won his draws at 63+%. When I look at his compete level, he's all of that of what Bergeron brought to the table. When I look at a guy that you project not being a 100-point guy, but probably a point per game guy, he is that. And he's bigger. I think Caleb's going to project to be a bigger guy. He's got big hands, big feet. He's 6'2" now, 186 pounds. He'll probably play at about 210, but highly competitive and 3-zone interest in his play. So I would look at a guy like Bergeron as being a kind of a loose comparable there.
Awesome. I love that. I know that's a tricky one to answer, so I appreciate you.
Yeah, it can be
entertaining us, but yeah, thank you for that.
Now, Sam, I'm going to give you the chance of a lifetime. We're going to put you in Bill Armstrong's shoes, and you're up at the podium at number 4 with where the Mammoth are and team makeup and everything. Who do you select right there at pick 4? And then that's a little bit of a follow-up.
Oh,
if you had the
I'm
option,
trading the pick. There's so many picks and prospects there. I'm trading the pick because I think I can acquire something that's going to give me some more immediate help.
Any player in mind?
So what that looks like. I haven't really thought about that, but here's the thing. You have found money because you jumped up 10 spots. You got an owner who's really anxious to push this thing forward. You got a team that's close to the playoffs. You got all kinds of picks. You don't have enough contracts for all the guys that you've picked. So that leads me to believe that there's going to be an option for him out there that gives you the opportunity to do something to help your team in the immediate future. And that's what I think he does.
Wow. No, so McDavid in a Utah Mammoth jersey coming up, right?
McDavid.
That's interesting because that found money aspect of this draft is something that we all kind of need to remember here.
And the thing is, like, when it gets to pick 4, there's going to be a bunch of teams calling. It might not be as hot and heavy right now, but there'll be teams calling as soon as that 3rd pick is made, because I do believe that that there's going to be a lot of action for that pick.
Interesting.
I can't wait.
Yeah. Well, Utah fans, buckle up. It's only going to be a couple weeks to see what the Mammoth do with that pick. Sam, thank you so much for coming on the show again. Enjoy this little moment you have before all the craziness of the draft comes up. Take a big breath and have a fantastic weekend, Sam.
Awesome. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Keep pumping up that Utah hockey brand, that Mammoth brand. It's only going to get bigger and better.
Awesome.
Yep. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Take care, guys.
You too.
Yeah.
Fantastic stuff from Sam Cosentino once again. If you have not checked out our interview with him last year around August, September, right before the season started, make sure to check that out. But man, some tidbits right there at the end of that interview that we talk about the draft. But first, do you have your fit ready for the draft? Because if not, go to shop.cleanhits.com. Make sure you get your Cult of GMBA t-shirt. I've been told from the old tome of General Manager BA, the more people who are wearing this shirt during the the better the prospect is. You definitely want to get your Cult of GMBA shirt. Yeah. We also have a brand new design that if you know what that Mammoth magic is and why that ping pong ball is number 3 despite the team picking 4. So get your Mammoth magic shirt, get that fit all figured out before the draft party you're attending. And then, of course, big shout out, we got our Logan Cooley, Low Cool himself. Tip of the cap to Donor Nation here. We got tons of fun summer colors in it. So make sure you got all your new Clean Hit swag out there. It helps the show a ton. And, you get to go to your draft party in style. Yeah. Anyway, let's get into that idea of maybe moving the 4th overall pick. Maybe we shouldn't be married to the idea that we're going to be drafting here. And maybe some of those names that we've been seeing floating around could potentially be one of those names that the team lands. And I think the biggest name that has appeared in trade chatter is none other than Dallas Stars forward Jason Robertson. So what do you guys think? Is this something to take the big swing? Maybe go for a top name that you normally aren't able to acquire and just try to fill out the roster this summer?
Yeah, I mean, a name like Jason Robertson does not come available very often. I actually have a hard time believing he is available, but there just continues to be smoke upon smoke upon smoke around this name, which is shocking to me. Teams do sometimes freak out and overcorrect after a disappointing playoff result. So we may be able to swoop in and take advantage of that and pick up a legitimate star player in Jason Robertson, who's a big winger, young player, ultra talented, has had so much success in this league individually from a production standpoint, and would instantaneously be one of the best players on the roster, both now and in the future. To Sam's point, we do have a lot of assets in the pipeline. We're already seeing valuable prospects like Justin Kipke not be signed. So it makes sense to kind of call the rebuild from the draft table perspective more or less complete, as we're seeing Simishev and Boot sign contracts, Cole Baudouin and TJ Ginla get closer. We're starting to really reap the rewards of a long and painful rebuild here. And could Jason Robertson be the cherry on top? My thought is, certainly from a talent perspective and from a value perspective, he's clearly somebody that I'd be happy to give up the 4th overall pick for. The only question I have is fit. And I don't mean from a personality or team fit. I mean, he's a big American kid, right? In the right age range as our other big American kids who are leading this team. But he's a winger, another winger. And we were fortunate enough to draft 3rd overall a few years back and pick up Logan Cooley, who appears to be the franchise's #1 center, which is phenomenal. Barrett Hayton, who was a 5th overall pick a few years before that, is looking like he's kind of a 2-3 tweener. There's some upside there, but we're not totally sure what he is. And I think that when you look at teams that are having playoff success year after year, legit contenders, one thing in common that they have typically is tons of depth and tons of talent down the middle. Not just one Barrett Hayton type, but several. And if we move 4th overall, which could effectively be Desnoyers or Higgins or Brady Martin or Frondell or O'Brien or one of the many centers that have been rumored, you're passing up on that option to shore up your center position long term to add yet another winger. So that's my only hesitation there, is if we were to trade 4th overall for Jason Robertson, what do we do about the center position long term?
Right. And I'm kind of in the same boat, but at the same time, I'm in the mindset, like, don't skip out on talent. Like, if Dallas calls you and says, hey, we'll do Robertson for 4 overall straight up, like, you take it and you figure out the rest. I agree with you, though. We need center depth, but it's just one of those guys, like you said, doesn't come around very often. And if it's truly on the table, you got to think Bill's considering it, because it's no secret to win hockey games. I mean, you see it like with Edmonton's problems right now. You got to score goals. You got to be good.
Yep.
And I think it's one of those things that. And of course, this would happen right after we just talked to a bunch of draft analysts, and I'm like falling in love with these prospects. But so interesting to see Sam's reaction, like before you even finish the question, Brad.
Yeah.
Like, trade it. And it's like, whoa. And he's got obviously ears to the ground, and it might just be his opinion, but it's not the first time we've heard about this, where, there's a lot of smoke around this. New York's calling, because they want 1 and 4. They want their, Schaefer and Higgins. And then, obviously Robertson's name floating around there. We've all clamored about Tage Thompson getting a change of scenery. So it's one of those things that I think if, in this particular case, if Robertson's available, then you have to have a hard conversation with one of the wingers that we currently have on the team. I'm not going to name anybody, but you can kind of imagine who we're not going to trade, and then look at the next best players on the next best wingers on the team, and then kind of go from there. So, and then you got to trade one of those for center help, or trade them for something else, like a defensive depth, and sign someone in free agency that can fill like a stopgap for a center, like a Duchesne, like we talked about. So there's a lot of interest in this, and it should be a fun couple weeks. I am so excited for this.
Yeah. Now,
and if not,
before
Jason
we go
Robertson,
into,
do you want to
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if not Jason Robertson, the one other name, Tage Thompson. I still don't know why Buffalo would move him, but we saw the chemistry with Keller and Cooley at the World Championship. Now, one twist is Buffalo just added Jarmo Kekalainen as the senior advisor, who's heavily a scouting background guy. So maybe he would have more interest in a 4th overall pick, and they can start rebuild 5.0 in Buffalo around that 4th overall pick. And then from Bill Armstrong's side, like, he drafted Tage, right? I mean, they had to move him to get O'Reilly, and that he was their MVP when they won the cup. So that turned out to be a good deal. But you also have to wonder if maybe for Bill Armstrong, if Tage Thompson is the one that got away, and then this is a chance to get him back.
Man, I have such a hard time with the Sabres doing yet another rebuild, especially that they moved Cousins. And brought in that immediate replacement, and guys like Darlene saying that they want to compete, and Peterka getting anxious. I feel like they're going to maybe shuffle some of these pieces around and do a little bit of retooling here rather than rebuilding. But what I was going to say is another Buffalo player who was traded several years ago, and how the Stanley Cup contenders, the Florida Panthers, have built this dominant team. Two of those core pieces, Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Reinhart, both came in via trades. Both of those players kind of felt like those guys that you don't get. Maybe Reinhart not as much because he didn't have quite the same career leading up to what he became once he got over to the Panthers. But I was looking back. Reinhart was traded for Devin Levi and a 2022 first pick, which means that would have been right near the end, because that would have been the year they played Vegas and lost in the Cup Finals. So what we're talking about the 31st overall pick and Devin Levi for Sam Reinhart. And then, of course, we have the Matthew Tkachuk trade, which, he was an upcoming free agent, made it clear he wasn't going to be signing in Calgary again. But those are those opportunities that the winning teams take advantage of. And if that is truly what's on the table here with somebody like Jason Robertson, there was a name I was floating around during the kind of the third round of the playoffs, of Shevnikov from Carolina. You take those swings. I think you can't let those opportunities pass.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. And when we won the lotto, my first impression was great. Now we bookend the rebuild. It started with Dylan Guenther. Now we're bookending it with this whoever we select at fourth.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, you're hoping whoever you pick reaches the level or the caliber of a player like Jason Robertson here.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to talk about that 2C spot again. So let's just, imagine that we move this pick, and let's say we get a winger help, whether that's Shevnikov, whether that's Jason Robertson, whether that's some other name that we haven't seen float around at all. We get another top 6 winger on a team that has upcoming potential top 6 wingers in the pipeline, with very little centers coming up in the pipeline. Corey, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this, and somebody from Minnesota.
Yeah.
But do you want to paint us a picture of how you felt at this beautiful masterpiece?
Corey's the Rossi posse. I love it.
So in this situation, you're kind of pushing all your chips in the off season, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you were to go trade more assets for Marco Rossi to bring him in to be the 2C, or go heavy in free agency and overpay for somebody like Sam Bennett, who there's been some rumors about, but I don't know how much.
I think he's going to resign in Florida.
Sounds like they're already talking about it. 8 times 8.
Yeah. Why would you leave Florida? Right, you get to live in Miami or Fort Lauderdale or whatever. The team is competitive. 3 straight trips to the finals. The team's fun to play for. Like, why would you leave?
One of the best coaches in the league.
As far as giving up future assets, I'm not too concerned about that. I don't think our 2026 pick is going to be too high anyway. So we do need to start climbing the ladder here. So if you do give up some assets for Marco Rossi, and I saw some stuff the other day that Minnesota might not even want to pick for him. They might want an actual roster player. Well, we can do that too. We got lots of players. Nick Schmaltz, I think, could be a fit there. I don't believe Minnesota would be on his no trade list. So I think he would be open to going there. I don't think you're going to be able to do Schmaltz straight up for Rossi, but we can package together some other stuff because we got lots of extra assets, extra picks, bundle some stuff up, get Rossi. Getting a better player. So, I mean, we made 2 deals at last year's draft with Marino and Sergachev. Maybe we can do 2 again. Maybe we can bring in a Tage and we can bring in Rossi.
Man.
Yeah, I don't know how available Tage is. I'm gonna
Same.
cross him right off my list. I think if Buffalo rebuilds again, they should be relegated. So that's not going to happen. Like, they should literally fold the franchise if they can't figure it out.
Yeah, that's why they're bringing back Atlanta. Atlanta's going to be in the NHL, and Buffalo's going to go out.
Yeah, Buffalo can be their minor league affiliate until they learn their lesson. It's a good market with a good fan base, so they should stick around. But it's cursed. Like, to get rid of it. So I'm gonna just cross Tage right off my list. I can't fathom that. But Svechnikov would be a huge ad, and Jason Robertson would be a huge ad, and that would be a situation where teams are just kind of flailing and not sure where to turn. Carolina didn't fire their coach and won't fire their coach. They have to do something massive because they continue to just relive the same Groundhog's Day experience over and over again of coming up short. So it seems counterintuitive to trade your young talent to fix your problems, but what the hell else are you going to do? I have one question, though. We've talked about Marco Rossi to death. We've talked about stopgap centers. We haven't talked a lot about other potential young center options like Rossi that aren't Rossi. And I just had a thought just now. If Sam Bennett signs a great big long extension in Florida,
I know where you're going.
That relegates Anton Lundell to the third line for basically forever. Now, he's not super highly paid, and he is good in that role, and they have every reason to keep him, but he probably is going to become an undervalued asset in a super depth role like that. I think he's got another level. I think there's more to this young player, and he could thrive maybe more in a higher role elsewhere. Brad, you watch a lot more of the Florida Panthers than I do. What would be your thoughts on the concept of Lundell potentially being in play if they re-sign Bennett and need to find some cap space?
Yeah, and this was something that we were talking about in the group chat before. And it was prior to the Seth Jones trade, where I was kind of making the argument that if they win again, they may want to keep the band together. And what are they going to do if they lose Aaron Ekblad? Do you care more about the center depth which you have, or your top defensive depth, which they would be much thinner at had they not made that Seth Jones trade?
Right.
I do think that trade helps them figure out the puzzle and gives them a lot more flexibility, because running Seth Jones and Gustav Forsling doesn't sound all that bad. Now, Forsling being really your big minute muncher and your sole minute muncher, if Ekblad had to walk because you wanted to keep Bennett and Lundell, that feels a lot worse. Now, if Ekblad says, hey, I'll come back at a discount to make this work, Bennett says, hey, I'll come back at a discount to make this work, now you got to figure out how to make this work.
Yeah.
And one thing we have is some cheap assets that are roster players that could play on that team right now, plus the draft equity and capital that a team like Florida may want to have to be able to make more trades down the road. So really, they have lost their main assets of Spencer Knight. They have Sam Oskevich still, which I think is somebody that they will want to keep. Granted, he's not really playing in the playoffs right now, but as this roster turns a little bit, that having that skill and that upside would definitely help them. Yeah, I mean, I hate to say McBain, but that's one hell of a fit. Plays wing and center, cheap. I mean, you could probably get McBain signed in the threes, high twos. That saves you a couple mil in cap space, and you kind of get to roll a similar player out. I don't think they're going to be able to keep Marchand, so you have a winger spot here. And if they manage to keep Ekblad and Bennett, your defensive core is kind of tight and ready to go. But
I think you might be underpaying McBain there. I think he might be closer to $4 million.
Okay.
Yeah, in which case it doesn't make much sense because Lundell's only making 5.5, I think.
5.
So, yeah, I was thinking pure futures for him.
Pure future. Well, I mean, I know he's a fan favorite here, but Maverick Lamora has a lot of value across the league. I mean, he feels like a player molded in what the Ice Cats have built.
We have like
can I throw one idea? Can I throw one idea out? Yeah, the 3 seconds are next year, Kenny.
That's what I'm saying.
What if the Cats said, Hey, sight unseen before the draft. We'll give you Lundell for 4 today. You have an hour to make the decision.
Lundell for 4?
Done.
For
Really?
4th overall?
I think he's a 70-point guy. He can be.
Really?
I don't know about that.
Well, here's a question here. What is Desnoyers and Martin's ceiling? Is it a lot higher than Lundell? When you alleviate the risk that Lundell has already arrived, how much higher of a ceiling does Frondell or Martin or Desnoyers have over Lundell, given that there's also the risk of the fact that they're teenagers and they haven't won Stanley Cups?
I'm thinking less of the players that would be available at that pick. I'm thinking more big picture with trading that pick. Now, I don't know. Maybe I'm way undervaluing valuing Anton Lundell, and that could be because he's behind Barkov. But the dude's nickname is Mini Barkov. So if you can actually get a Barkov light, yeah, I can see that trade making sense. But as of right now, like his track record, does it make sense for 4th overall? I don't know.
We tried to get him before. Remember, he was our ask in the Chychrun trade to Florida, and they wouldn't bite.
Yeah.
And I could see Chychrun. I could see Chychrun. I would make that trade even today, even after Chychrun's massive year. I don't know, man. A top 5 pick doesn't get traded very often. I feel like a lot of teams are chomping at the bit for that, and I think that it would be an option for sure. I don't know if it's the option. Like, what are his numbers?
Jason Robertson's a much better player, right? But he's a winger.
Yeah,
and centers are impossible to get, bro.
What, like 5-6 years older?
But yeah, exactly. But
no, twice the price.
He can't.
Robertson was the same draft year as Hayton, right?
Yeah, I think Robertson's like 25, and
he may have been the year before.
Okay,
so I think
maybe
Robertson's.
I would rather do.
I think
I'd rather do 4 for Lundell than Robertson.
So we're talking about a player here, and I get it, the premium position, but we're talking about a player here that has not capped 45 points in a season.
Yep.
And I know he's behind 2, like he's a 3rd line center, right? Yep. I just don't know if that's a player that I can see the delta, like him closing in the delta of 40 points to get to a 70 point player on this team. Because
probably not.
He's gonna be behind Cooley, right? So he's not gonna be a 1st line center.
What if he's a 60-point center, but he's solid both ways?
Yeah,
and any day.
And you can go Cooley, Lundell, Hayton.
Is Desnoyers and Martin more than a 60-point player who's solid both ways?
So yeah,
right.
I agree with you there. Like, I don't know. I think if you can bet on young talent, then don't take a player at 4 that you're not sure is ever going to pan out. Like, I love a Brady Martin, right? But like, does his game translate well to the NHL? Or is he just like an elite checking line, 4th line forward, right? So, of course, if you gave me that option in 2 years, like, do you want an elite checking forward on 4th line, or you want a young center in Lundell? I'm taking Lundell. I'm thinking more of like the amount of teams are going to be calling us for this pick. And I don't know if Lundell is the one guy that I'd want. Like I said,
I think all those teams are going to call and offer us wingers, though.
Yeah,
I don't think they're going to call and offer us centers. Yeah,
there is a serious lack of 1st and 2nd line centers in the league because there are 32 teams now.
Yeah,
and a lot of teams are looking for centers.
Yep, there are.
Sure.
You're
right. Would make
8 more center spots, NHL quality center spots that need to be filled than there were pre-Vegas.
So, given that demand for centers,
spots.
If Nashville had a competent GM, they would make a killing right now for Ryan O'Reilly.
I know.
Mm-hmm. So,
and
I guess
Forsberg and everyone just what are
they
doing?
Sell the mascot too.
They're just in denial, man.
Yeah,
it's bizarre. They're like, yeah, I know we're picking really high in the 1st round every year, and we suck, but we're actually a really good and competitive team. Obviously, yeah. I mean,
so
Yossi just won the Norris, so why?
I look at Florida, and I think they're just going to find something to kick the can down the road for a year when Bob's deal is up, and they'll bring in some goalie he's making 10. So bring in some goalie making like $4 million, and that frees up some money. And a year from now, cap goes up again. So there's another stack of cash to work with.
So I'm not permanently excluding Corey from this question because I know I do want to hear his answer, but I already feel like I know which way he's going to go. Yeah, exactly. So Trent and Brad, I'll flip this on you now. So would you rather trade 4th overall for Lundell or trade 4th overall for Robertson and then figure out a way to add Rossi to this team long term? So you get Robertson and Rossi by trading away assets that either A, we're not planning to keep, or B, it's probably going to be another first rounder next year, right? So would you do 4th overall this year and first round pick next year for Robertson and Rossi plus some extra parts, or would you rather just say I'm trading 4th overall for Lundell and then figuring out the rest?
Man, I like the 6'1" cup winning center.
Okay.
That has upside and is 23.
How big is the gap between Rossi and Lundell though?
I don't know.
About 5 inches. It's about 5 inches. Yeah.
I knew that was coming.
But around here we call that 7. All right.
Yeah. Oh my God.
What I get worried about of a Robertson, Keller, Rossi, Cooley, Gunther, Boot / Ginla is there's a lot of just high-end talent there, which I mean, obviously that sounds great, but it's almost like the opposite of what Dallas's blue line looked like two playoffs ago, where there was Heiskanen as the two-way guy who could move the puck, and then there was just a bunch of pylons. It's like the exact opposite of like they can all score, they can all shoot, they can all pass. At what point is it like not enough grit or not enough two-way play or not enough mix? Like it's like a one ingredient ice cream and maybe your favorite flavor, but man, sometimes I want to have different flavors all mixed up. I want the salty and the sweet, and it's only 9 a.m., but I'm about ready to go get a pint of ice cream now.
It sounds awesome. Well, I agree with you guys. I really like Lundell as a player. I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm just like, man, it's just, I guess it's like the initial shock of considering that.
Well, here's one way to look at it. You know, Bill Armstrong talks about the rebuild, and he says, "Hey, look, you know, I could go out and spend a bunch of money on free agency and sign 30-year-old guys, but the one thing that I can't do is put Logan Cooley and Dylan Gunther in a time machine and make them 25. At the end of the day, they're 20 and 21 years old, and we're not going to be in our contention window until they are 25, 26. And I don't have a time machine. But if you're thinking about drafting Anton Frundell at 4th overall, and you can trade it for Anton Lundell today, that is a time machine. You just literally time warped him 5 years into the future and got the same dude. So Bill Armstrong has talked a lot about lamenting his lack of a time machine, and this potentially is a little bit of a time machine trade. I would agree in a vacuum, a player whose offensive production has been as limited as Lundell's is a little bit rich for 4th overall. I would almost rather trade the 14th if we hadn't won the lottery with some extra picks thrown in and other things to make that work. But and unfortunately, Florida doesn't have anything else to balance it out. We can't just like also get their 2nd round pick because they have no picks left. I think asking for Samoskovich in addition to Lundell for a single draft pick going back is probably a little bit rich too. They probably value Samoskovich's contract, so I don't think we're going to get anything else. I think it'd have to be like that. I think it'd have to be like 4 for Lundell or it doesn't work. You know what I mean? So it'd be a tough call. I guess I'd really want to lean heavily on the amateur scouting department and make them really plead their case for why they think these kids available at number 4 have a much higher long-term upside. And fit better within our prospective contention window than Lundell. I think it would be a really hard choice, which says to me it's probably close to fair. I think giving 4 overall for Robertson, Dallas might want a little bit more. Just because he's more of a star player. Then you're talking about maybe it's 4th overall plus Michael Kesselring or something that's very dear to us and part of our central core here moving forward. And it's like, all right, if we have to give up Kesselring and 4th overall and to get Robertson, then we have to figure out the center anyway. Is just giving 4th overall for Lundell and then figuring out what to do about the wingers and the rest later a little bit of an easier option. I don't know.
Corey?
I mean, I'd much rather give up the assets for a couple of trades rather than going to free agency. There's not a whole lot of appeal to me in free agency. Keeler's, Besser, they're going to be $10 million. Marchand, but I don't think he's coming to Utah.
DJ Bean from what Chaos says otherwise, but
I love that.
We'll see.
It'd be hilarious. Talk about the strangest fit for any market. Wait a second. Let me do my best Bob Ross impression here and paint you guys a picture.
Oh, I thought you had breaking news.
Oh, God. No. Yeah, I know. You scared the crap out of me, Brad.
All right.
4th overall traded for Lundell.
4th overall for Anton Lundell, who, by the way, only has 2 less points than Alexander Barkov in this playoffs, who has only one.
He's got 15 points in 20 games.
3 less points than Barkov, 2 less than Reinhart, even though Reinhart's played 2 less games. Then you dump a bunch of money to get his line mate this offseason.
Yeah.
You keep
really overpay him. Overpay the hell out of him, like a 3-year deal for like 10 mil each year or something like that. Something crazy. A short-term deal that's just way bloated on AAV because you don't need the space for the next 3 years anyways because of all the ELCs and bridge deals. Yeah.
Yep. Because, Lundell and Marchand have looked special together this offseason.
Okay.
And if you can get Lundell's confidence boosted a little bit and giving him maybe a little bit of that comfort zone of playing with a guy who's really, really enjoyed playing with. Now I'm
imagining Tija Ginla on that line. Oh,
later.
Gosh.
I mean, Tija would eventually kind of be the Marchand of that line.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a masterpiece,
right? And I mean, you're convincing me more of the Lundell. I don't hate it, and I guess it's important to know. Or I don't want to say no, but it's probably a good point to make here. We've talked about this in previous episodes, but you got to think about this from Bill Armstrong's point of view. He's been working on this rebuild for years. He's drafted a ton of players. GMs, unfortunately, don't get to see the big picture all the time. They work so hard to build this team, and then they get canned. So in his shoes, he might be looking at this like, hey, this is playoffs or bust, right? And I do have found money. I could add another massive prospect to this pool. The organization itself may not be in this position of picking top 5 in a long time if the plan goes accordingly, right?
Yep.
Bill Armstrong may not look at it that way. Bill Armstrong might be like, well, hey, the organization may not be in this position, so they might have, desire to pick a player here, but I've picked so many. I'm ready to make this team a playoff contender right now. So Bill Armstrong, as much as he loves, he was an amateur scout, director of scouting in St. Louis. He built his career on this. As much as he loves picking these young players, these foundational pieces, these guys might be 3 or 4 years away. He doesn't know if he's going to even be here for that. I'm starting to think I'm right there with Sam now that we might be looking at trading this pick.
So what if you do
heavily leaning towards it, actually?
4 for Lundell.
Okay.
And then Florida can use 4 to pick Deone the next Bergeron. He's not going to be able to play for 2 years, but it gives him a nice little buffer, and they can figure out something else in the meantime.
On a team like Florida, he probably only needs 1 more year, and then he can start making that transition because of how their depth. Which Utah podcast has Bill Armstrong coming on next? Hopefully it could be us. But if you're out there, Cole's new podcast too is awesome. Make sure you're checking that out. Or if you're SLC Puck, who may be getting some phone calls in with Bill, and they have his first guest be none other than GMBA. whoever gets to speak to him next, I want to know who he would have taken in the 2020 NHL draft. Because if the Coyotes had not done Stretchgate, which if you don't know what that is, make sure you watch our top trades GMBA has ever made, because we go into depth about that there. And we were picking around that 12 to 16th pick. Anton Lundell went 12th overall in 2020. I would wonder if that would have been target number 1 for Bill Armstrong that year. And then you kind of see this rebuild now bookending at 2020 with Anton Lundell, 2021 with Dylan Gunther. Then you get the Cooley and Geeky, which turns into Sergachev and Mavlam, and then Boot and Simashev, and then the other bookend is Tisha Ginla and Kopadwan.
Wow. Guys, my wheels are turning now. Like I can't help but to think that Armstrong's going to trade this friggin' pick, isn't he? After all the work that Trent has put in. Trent has put in watching all these prospects, staying up till 3 a.m, eating Cheetos, just dying over like analyzing everything. We're trading this friggin' pick. What's your guys' gut feeling? Like I'm just gonna do round table. Brad, we trading or picking?
I don't know. Sam really changed my mind on this. I think it has to be for the right thing. And I think that right thing has to be very, very specific. But
gut reaction though, if you had to choose right now.
I'm starting to think we're going to trade it.
Okay. Trent, trading or picking?
I think we'll stick and pick. We could trade up potentially if they're really, really after Michael Misa. I had an idea of potentially trading 4th plus to San Jose for 2nd, and then San Jose turns around and deals 4th to the Islanders for Noah Dobson. I think San Jose could really use Dobson more than we could. And the Islanders really want Higgins badly to go with Schaefer. So, some kind of scenario like that where there's a reason why there's jockeying in the top 4 could let us trade up if we really want to pursue a higher level of talent up there. I think that a lot of tumblers would have to fall in just the right place to unlock that whole riddle. So probably not very likely. I don't think we're trading down. We could trade out, but I think the most likely thing is stick and pick. And that's probably what I would do. I would probably stay right there at number 4, not overthink it, and take the highest rated center on my list. And then I would move into free agency in the trade market, looking to address shorter term needs. Maybe look at William Karlsson rather than Anton Lundell. Maybe look at Matt Duchene as a stopgap as we're waiting. I'm a little bit more conservative, but you know what? I also probably would not have, I would not have had the guts to make the Mikhail Sergachev trade last year either. So Bill Armstrong swings bigger than I do. So one thing is for sure, no matter which way we go, it's going to be a whole hell of a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. Corey, what's your gut reaction?
I think we'll keep the pick, we'll use the pick, but then we'll trade some other pieces that could potentially hurt to fill some other needs.
So we're legitimately 50-50. Brad and I think it's probably a trade, or leaning towards a trade. I don't want to say probably. And then Corey and Trent are bringing us back to reality.
Those scout at heart, right? That's win a 4th overall and to trade it. I don't know.
I know it. Like I said, I don't know how I feel about either. I fell in love with these prospects, but just thinking about this from Bill's perspective kind of makes me wonder. He said playoffs are bust. There's a ton of smoke around this team. Utah's going to make some big moves. It's like, well, who are we trading then? Who are we trading besides this fancy new found money that we have moving up 10 spots in the draft? That's just like the one low-hanging fruit, I know. But that's what's gotten me thinking like, oh, boy, Sam might be onto something here. So But I digress. We've been yapping about this for a lot, and we could talk a lot longer, but I know that everybody's probably signed off at this point. So
we got 2 more weeks until the draft. So we will be putting our tinfoil hats on and talking about all the crazy stuff that could potentially go down for a couple more episodes at least. And again, don't forget, if you want to have some new swag for your draft parties that you are attending, like that Cult of GMBA t-shirt, or the new Mammoth Magic shirt, or the awesome new Low Cools shirt. Shout out to Sophie from Donor Nation. She helped out with the design and it just looks fantastic. Definitely make sure you're going over to shop.cleanhitshockey.com. Again, that's a huge way to help support Clean Hits, the podcast. Give us a like, give us a subscribe on YouTube, leave a comment of what you think about those trade potential deals that we're imagining up. Paint your picture, if you will, in the comment section. Make sure you're subscribed to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, if you prefer not to see our faces and just listen to us, or come hang with us in our Discord, which is discord.cleanhitshockey.com. We have a whole channel devoted to prospects. We have a whole channel devoted to trades. We have a ton of absolutely mammoth-sized fanatics in there that just decide to talk hockey all day. We're all in there chopping it up as well. I mean, there's some days I can't even keep up with it. Big shout out to all of our friends in the Discord. Big shout out to SLC Puck. You're still doing incredible stuff. And the mustache looks great. I have to just say it. Yeah. Again, June 27th, mark it down. Get those shirts now so you can have them in time. And till next time, adios.
Cheers, guys.
Running it now. Watch the game change.